Proverbs chapter 21 is where we're going to start today, and then we will end up in Philippians chapter 2. Proverbs chapter 21. I'm going to read verse 31 first, and then I'm going to read verse 30. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with or comes from the Lord. The Living New Testament says, go ahead and prepare for the conflict, but victory comes from God. And verse 30 is incredible. If you're looking for a Bible verse to memorize, I suggest this one. There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. Again, the Living says, no one, regardless of how shrewd or well-advised he is, can stand against the Lord. I don't know about you, I like those two verses. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests or comes from the Lord. Solomon says, get your horse ready for battle. I don't know anything about horses in battle, and so I made myself a little list. How do you get your horse ready for battle? And I realized that the first thing you need is a horse. So I said, well, I need to get a horse. Well, I need to back up a step before that. I need to actually back up 2 steps before that, because I need to get the training and the education that I need so that I can have the funds that I need, so that I can get the horse I need, so that I can prepare it for battle. And so my blood sugar must have been a little off that evening or something. But I think get the training I need, get the education that I need, so that I can get a job I need that will give me the money I need, so that I can get a horse. But I need to make sure I get the right horse. So I need to do some, I don't know, does Kelly Blue Book do a thing for horses? I don't know, but I need to look for the horse. Because I don't know a whole lot about horses, but I know there are different kinds. I know that there are the thoroughbreds that race, in the Kentucky Derby. I don't think that's what you want for a war horse unless you're going to run away. And there are work horses that are probably too slow and clumsy to go into battle, so you don't want one of those. You don't really want a Tennessee Walker to prance into battle. And you sure don't want a show pony. You got to make sure that you buy the right kind of horse. Do the study that you need to make sure that you're buying a war horse. Get the one you need for the purpose for which you're purchasing it, and then train it and prepare it for battle. I'm not sure how you do that either, but I tried to think about what do you need in a horse that you're going to ride into battle. And I would think, well, it needs to be able to keep its balance. It needs to be able, to keep its equilibrium. It doesn't need to be easily panicked. It needs to immediately respond to your commands, or the pressure of your heel in its side to where you want it to go. You got to do the training process. And then Solomon says, but remember, after you've gone through all of this, victory does not come to you because you trained your horse. Victory comes from the Lord. But we sure had to do a lot of effort and a lot of work and save a lot of money to get that horse. But the victory does not come from the horse. The victory comes from the Lord. And that is called synergism. Synergism is when 2 elements work together to accomplish what they can't accomplish by themselves. If you had one child, and then you agreed to babysit for a second child about the same age as your child, you learned synergism. That 2 mischievous children can get in exponentially more trouble than one can by themselves. That's synergism. You see those two atoms of hydrogen over there and that one atom of oxygen over there. Oh well, but get them together and you're going to get water. Somebody said synergism is when 1 + 1 = 3 or even more than that. It's when two elements work together to accomplish more than what they can accomplish by themselves. And that is a Christian life principle. God has his part, we have our part. God won't do my part, and I can't do God's part. And we need to understand that, and we need to make sure we know whose part is who. God will not do my part. We cannot do his part. But this principle of spiritual synergism is at work from day 6 of creation. God created a garden. And then he created Adam. And Genesis 2:15 tells us that he put Adam in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. Now, Adam couldn't create the garden, and God wasn't going to take care of it. Synergism. The preacher went to visit one of his farmers, and everything was in full bloom, and the crops were, ripe and ready for harvest. And the preacher said, "Man, this is an impressive farm. You and the Lord have really done a good job here." And the guy said, "You should have seen it when the Lord had it by himself." We work together. God has his part, we have ours. We can't do his, he won't do ours. Synergism. Genesis chapter 6. The world becomes so evil that God decides he's going to start over with Noah and his family. And in Genesis 6:14, God says, in essence, I'm going to destroy the world, but I'm going to save you. Oh, by the way, you need to build an ark. And again, we have to remember that there's never been rain before now. And who in the world would know what an ark was? God, again, who spoke and there was light, and who spoke and the worlds came into existence, could have spoken an ark into existence. But he made Noah build the ark. And we're not sure exactly how long he took. Probably at least 75 years, maybe as long, some think, as 120 years to build the ark. God sent the flood. Noah had to build the ark. Synergism. Exodus chapter 14. The children of Israel are getting ready to get out of Egypt. The Red Sea is in front of them. Pharaoh's army is chasing behind them. And the people are crying out for help. And God says, "Why are you crying out to me? Moses, raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water." And you know what happens? The Red Sea parts. They walk through on dry ground. When everybody gets through, he says, "All right, stretch your arm out again." The water comes back and gets rid of the Egyptian army. Now, if I were a betting person, I would bet that all of us together could go down to the Savannah River and stretch out our hands and nothing would happen. But when God is in the stretched out arm, the Red Sea parts. Synergism. We do our part, God does his part. Amazing things happen. Joshua chapter 3. They're getting ready to go into the promised land now. Getting ready to cross the Jordan River. Again, God could have spoken the river to part. But he tells the priests who are carrying the ark, you get in the river. And when all of you are in the river's going to part. And we know that it did. And the children of Israel walked through on dry ground. Again, we could all load up after church, go walk into the Savannah River. We just going to get wet. But when God tells you to walk through, and you walk through, God plus you working in synergism, the waters part. Joshua chapter 6, the Battle of Jericho. About this time you're wondering, is he going to go through the whole Bible this morning? Joshua chapter 6, the Battle of Jericho. You remember the orders. March around the city once a day for 6 days. The priests blow their trumpets, but the people are not allowed to say a word. On the 7th day, they march around 7 times. And the 7th time around, Joshua says, shout. And Joshua 6:20 tells us what happens. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted. And at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged in and took the city. And those of you who know men know exactly what happened that night. Some guy got home and told his wife, you know, it was my blast on the trumpet that caused that wall to come down. And some guy is telling his kids, boy, when Daddy shouted, man, that wall came down, right? But you know that trumpets and shouts don't cause walls to fall. And by the way, they found the ruins of the walls of Jericho. They were wide enough that literally they could have held chariot races on top of the wall. Blowing a trumpet and shouting doesn't bring a wall like that down unless God is in the trumpet and God is in the shout. And what's the word? Synergism. Matthew chapter 28. Jesus and the Great Commission. All power is given to me in heaven and earth. You go and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatever I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. I have all power, Jesus says. You go make disciples. I will be with you in my power. And when the word goes forth in the power of the Spirit, people are brought to Christ. Synergism. Paul puts it this way in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9. We are laborers together with God. That's synergism. That's one of the exciting things about being a pastor. I can preach a sermon and God can take that and apply it to everybody that hears it in a different way. I've had people stop me and say, you remember last week when you said such and such? Man, I really needed to hear that. I said, I don't think I said that. I said, yes, you did. I don't think I said that. And they have been so insistent that I've gone back and listened. I did not say that. But God used it to speak something that they needed into their spirit. That's synergism. That is an incredibly exciting thing to be a part of. Laboring together with God. Each of us is a laborer together with God. And that brings us to Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. This is the New King James. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Now, he did not say work for your salvation. Very important you catch that. We do not work for our salvation. He said work out your salvation because God is working in you. So the way that works, God works it in, we work it out. It's synergism. Our part, work out your own salvation, is to live up to our potential. That word work out means to carry it to its goal. It's used for working a field or working a mine, bringing something to completion, living up to your potential. I remember hearing someone say one time there is a tremendous gap between the promise of our lives and the performance of our lives. And that's sure true, isn't it? Our job as believers is to work on narrowing that gap. living up to our potential, to borrow a slogan, to be all that we can be with God's help. That's not how you become a Christian, it's how you live as a Christian. God works it in you, you work it out to its completion. Chuck Swindoll puts it this way. When we become ill, we go to a physician. He diagnoses our ailment, prescribes the proper treatment. He hands us a small slip of paper on which he's written the correct prescription, and we take it to the pharmacist who fills the prescription, gives us the medication. So far, everything has been done for us. Diagnosis, prescription, medication. It now becomes our responsibility to follow the doctor's orders. By working out the process, we enjoy the benefit of the physician's and pharmacist's contributions to our health. This is also true spiritually speaking. And again, this is a real delicate balance, because some of us want to do God's part, and others of us want God to do our part. We want God to do it all. We want to kick back in our recliner and binge watch some television show and let God just sprinkle down money from the ceiling, But it just doesn't work that way. God will not do our part. We cannot do his part. One time the philosopher John Dewey heard some noise and went up to where the bathroom was, and the floor was flooded with water. And his son was in there trying to clean it up. And they said, Dewey, being the philosopher, was just kind of looking and pondering like what possibly could have caused this to happen, when his son said, Dad, this is not the time to think, it's the time to mop. There's time that we've got to do something. God's not going to do it for us. Live up to our potential. That's our part. Our part is also to take responsibility for ourselves. Boy, that's rare, isn't it? People taking responsibility for themselves. It's very prevalent in our society, but it's not new to our society. The first time people passed the buck was the Garden of Eden. God said, Adam, what did you do? He said, oh, it was the woman. Eve, what did you do? It was the serpent. And we need to learn that if we're going to do our part in this spiritual synergism, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. I remember when Brian was coaching football, and he was, at that time, the offensive line coach. And there was a play when one of the opposing defensive linemen got through to our quarterback. And Brian called the two guys from that side of the offensive line to him. And I could hear them because I was close enough to the sidelines, where the one guy said, that wasn't my guy. And the other man said, oh, it wasn't my guy. And Brian said, well, it was somebody's guy. Take responsibility. And we need to learn to do that. We have to be responsible for doing our part. Your spiritual growth is your responsibility. Open Doors here to help, but we're not responsible for your spiritual growth. You're responsible for your spiritual growth. So live up to your potential, take responsibility for yourself, and third, while you're doing that, depend on God. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Depend on God. Now, the fear and trembling does not mean I'm terrified of God. It has the word with it of caution and paying attention. In other words, I want to live my life carefully. I want to make sure that I am giving an accurate representation of what it means to be a Christian. One of the biggest challenges that Bible-believing Christians face in our society is there are too many people calling themselves Christians who aren't living the Bible and who aren't acting like Christ. And we need to make sure that we have that fear and trembling, that is, that caution and care that says, Lord, let me live my life to be an accurate representation of what it means to be a follower of Christ. So that's our part. Live up to our potential, take responsibility for ourselves while we depend on God. God's part It is God who works in you to will and to do. That is, God's part is to provide the desire and the power so that we can do what we need to do. Because, see, you can't even do your part without God's help. And so he gives us the desire and the power to do his will. I love that word. It is God that works in you. On Time Change Sunday, it's good to know that that word works in you is the word from which we get our word energy and energizing. It is God who energizes you to will and do his good pleasure. Now, we have all learned that God working in us is never as fast as we want it to be, and it's never as comfortable as we want it to be. You think that it took God 40 years to get Moses ready to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. And as Moses tended sheep on the backside of the desert, God was working in him to get him ready so that he could work through him. It is God who works in you to will and to do. To will, that's desire, motivation, intention, determination. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but is there anybody in here like me who sometimes you just don't feel like doing the right thing? You know, it just, oh man, let me get some revenge. You know, I want to say that. You know, I want to, you know, and we sometimes we don't have the desire. Sometimes we don't feel like doing the right thing. I had somebody ask me one time, why do I have to always be the adult? You know, we don't want to do that sometimes. We want to scream and holler and get revenge and gossip and all that kind of stuff. We don't feel like doing the right thing. And it's okay to pray, God, give me the desire to do the right thing. You know, maybe you've never thought about that. It's okay. You know, it doesn't happen automatically. God, give me the desire to do the right thing. However, if you have desire, but you don't have the power, you're going to be frustrated. So not only does God give us the desire, he gives us to do the power to do what we need to do. This is an incredible verse. We do our part. God will give us the desire and the power to do the right thing. So that problem that's plaguing you, that area of life where you're struggling, have you asked God to give you the desire and the power to do what you know you need to do? And don't pray like Augustine used to pray. Before Augustine was Saint Augustine, he was Rowdy Augustine. You know? And he used to pray by his own testimony in his writings. He used to pray for God to help him to be good while he was hoping that God was not hearing his prayer. You know, so he said, no, Lord, give me the desire and the power to do your will. Give me the desire and the power to do what I know is right in this situation. Living the Christian life is not easy. Never has been. It's not easy now. But in these two verses, Proverbs 21, verses 30 and 31, first I encourage you, understand the principle of spiritual synergism. The horse is made ready for the battle. Or as the Living says, go ahead, prepare for the conflict. You do your part. Get your training, get your job, get your money, get your horse, get it trained. But God brings the victory. And again, I encourage you, memorize that promise of verse 30. There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. You get your horse ready, victory comes from the Lord. You do your part, watch God do his part. Prepare your horse, knowing that victory's promised. It comes from the Lord. Synergism. You do your part. Watch God do his part. And together, wow. I heard about some fable somewhere of a little fly that landed on top of an elephant just as the elephant was getting to walk across a swinging bridge. And that bridge groaned and squeaked and swung, and they got to the other side, and the fly said, "Boy, we really took it out on that bridge, didn't we?" Well, if we could just be the fly and land on God and let us do our part and let him do his part, wow. We'll see things accomplished that we'll understand. 1 and 1 equals more than 3. Little is much when God is in it. You prepare your horse for the battle. Watch God give you the victory. Father, thank you for that promise that there is nothing and no one, no matter how shrewd they may be, that can stand against you. And when we do our part, you do your part, and amazing things happen. We're so thankful for that. Thank you that you do not leave us on our own, but you work in us and through us to accomplish your will. So, Lord, for those of us who are here today, and maybe we're struggling in an area of our lives, and maybe we've never really thought to pray for help, Lord, give us the desire and the power to do what we know we need to. Give us the desire and the power to live in obedience to you. Give us the desire and the power to be a witness for you. Give us the desire and the power to live for you all the days of our lives. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today. You're dismissed.